GB News invited a racist on to their TV show, and the lady was called Iman Aiton, and she's another version of a Narinda, or a Yasmin Alibi Brown, except she's far more overt. Now, you have to really pay attention to the things that this woman is saying, because these are the final dregs of a race grifter. So this woman is a race grifter. She makes her money talking about the issues between black and white people. And so in order for her to make a living, she rubs the black and white people against each other in an abrasive manner. You could put it like that in philosophical terms. And the sparks that are created, she feeds on those sparks and makes money doing so. So in aggravating people, in making our world a worse place, this woman makes money. And in trying to be clever and trying to present these complex arguments, she actually lays bare her own feelings about white people and racism.
But you don't think maybe it should happen today because of the way we now view the white saviour attitude towards Africa?
Yeah, I echo your sentiments, Dawn. Thank you for having me, as always. I echo your sentiments. I was even lost when I listened to that. Forgive me, I don't remember her name, but I was listening to her. You just showed her a second ago, talking about her experience having to go through all of that. And I found it very relatable. And I understood her kind of plight and what it was that she was trying to achieve. This is where we go wrong in terms of understanding saviour, this kind of white saviorism. People forget about the historical context, okay? So before I get to Live Aid, let me just give you the context. When we think about black and brown people, or black people, African people, Caribbean people talking about white saviorism, a lot of them are referring to the historical context, right? Something in the past, we all know this, that it still lingers and affects our thoughts and feelings and decision-making to this day. And so when we think about white saviorism in the past, it has negative connotations. The reason why is because that actually led to slavery and colonialism in Africa and in the Caribbean for literally hundreds of years, and people forget that, so much so that during the 1700s, white people actually used Christianity, religion, and white Jesus and the Bible to create something called the Slave Bible. Dawn, may I just finish my point? So it's very important, please. What I'm trying to say is that they ended up utilizing religion. They created a slave Bible for black people, which was used to pacify, subjugate, and control black people. So when black people think of white saviorism, in spite of all of their noble actions as of late, we still remember what it was that you did with your white saviorism back in the day in 1700s when you decided to create the slave Bible and tell black people that they were beneath.
I get all that. I get all the history. We do all understand that. We do understand that.
No, we don't,
but this was about
I think you and I do. Not all of your audience, with all due respect. With all due respect, Dawn, not all of us
I think we do. I think we do know our history, Iman, now on this one.
No,
but this was about.
Not from the perspective of black people, Dawn. Please,
Iman,
not from the perspective of black people and the victims.
Iman, but this was about feeding children.
Yes, of course. So you've just discounted everything that I've just said. So I'll
No, I haven't discounted everything you just said. I'm just saying that Live Aid was simply about feeding children, mostly children in this case. Why is that wrong?
No, it's not. You've also just spoke about white saviorism, Dawn. That's the whole point of your whole segment. And those two things are connected. Those two things are connected. So hold on a second. I'm going to answer your question. You asked me a question. I'm going to answer it, Dawn, with all due respect. You started your segment by talking about white saviorism. So I've explained why that is a problem for many people that look like me. You've also spoken about the fact that we have the aforementioned lady who had to go through hell, having to try to make sure that she helped. Because to be a savior is to help. So now we move on to the next part of your point. But those two things are interlinked. Yeah, please remember that. So in terms of why it's a problem now, I'll give you a very simple answer. Two communities, Dawn. Woke versus anti-woke. Those are the two communities as to why it is not feasible for Action Aid or Live Aid, or sorry, not Action Aid, Live Aid, to be successful in this day and age. The reason why is because those two communities are at odds. We have the anti-woke that have forgotten about the fact that their white savior complex did good. They ended slavery. They did DEI. They had the Human Rights Act. They had the Human Rights Act of 1998. They had the Race Relations Act of 1976. They've forgotten about that. And right now, in 2025, Dawn, the political climate is saying, I'm anti-woke, so therefore I'm going to forget about what my ancestors did. I'm going to focus on me, myself, and I, and my community. And then you have, conversely, the woke brigade, as your channel potentially likes to call it. Okay?
Copyright that. That's been around for a while.
We do want to help people around the world, and are happy to virtue signal. We can probably agree in that respect. Okay, I'm finding some balance here, and are also conscious of the fact that white saviorism has caused damage in the past, so therefore they are acutely aware of the good and the bad that comes with it. That is the answer to your question. You asked me about white saviorism, you asked me why it's bad, you asked me, I've answered the question. That's the truth. It's good and it's bad, but the reality is we need to remember the historical context. That's the truth, Dawn. That's the truth.
Okay.
And that's why it's bad.
So do you think that the original Live Aid 40 years ago, which raised £150 million for Ethiopia, the Ethiopian famine, should not have taken place?
Oh, God, no. You know I'm more intelligent than that, Dawn. You have met me. Please do not answer such a doltish question, with all due respect.
Okay,
of course not. It raised a lot of money. And first and foremost, I just want to say, the reason why it's an issue in regards to the white saviorism is because they did it completely wrong. Their lyrics were antiquated. Their lyrics were generalizations. Live Aid in 1985 was specific. It was talking about Ethiopia and Sudan, 2 countries out of 54, but yet the lyrics was just talking about Africa. Africa's no snow. Africa, I'm not even going to give you the lyrics.
Yeah, the lyrics of the song were ridiculous. No, I do get the point. But...
Hold on, right, Dawn, it was a generalisation. Live Aid was had antiquated lyrics, and last but not least, it led to a lack of self-esteem and pride for Black people all around the world, because we kept seeing images of swollen bellies and Black people and flies in their eyes. And then we didn't see that with white people when we came to England, Windrush up until now. So therefore, there is a complete distinction between how one views a Black person, swollen belly, flies in their eyes, Africa,
I get that.
versus England, capitalism, money. Oh, I have a good life. This is why we have issues with immigration now, because you lot made sure you told the world how great you are. So this is what happens. Sorry, right tangent.
Okay.
When you're listening to this lady here, one thing that struck me was that the narrative that this lady is proposing needs time to develop. If an idea is so complicated that it needs 5 minutes to explain, then it's not a very good idea. The best ideas are very, very simple. And so, really, in order to keep this racism argument going, this lady needs to come up with a narrative, and it's so far removed from reality that she has to go into a lot of depth and has to give you historical narrative and make sure we understand everything. But everything that she just said there wasn't relatable to the modern day. The word salad that is necessary for people like this lady in order to progress her narrative is getting harder and deeper and more complicated, simply because as we move forward in society, racism is something that's far less. It's going away over time. It's not an issue for most people in this country anymore. Not at all. I can't remember the last time I witnessed any type of overt racism in society. I just can't. I have seen racism coming from all different types of people online and on the internet, but that's what the internet does. But certainly in modern life, I don't see it anymore. And the harder it becomes for this lady in order to get her narrative across, and the more complicated she needs it to be. There are other things that I could pick out from there, but overall, I think you would have got the condescending tone that she uses with which to argue with the presenter here, and repeating a name all the time. Dawn. I'm talking. Can you not talk over the top of me? And this presenter was far too nice to her. She should have just said, this is my show, I've invited you on, now answer the question. And even with direct questions, the lady can't avoid going into really complicated detail because that's what the narrative demands that she does. So the question was, do you think that Live Aid should have happened today? It's quite a direct question. It requires a yes or no. And then, of course, you get an insult back. Well, I'm not that doltish and I'm more intelligent than to argue that question directly. Well, that's the point that you were brought on the show to talk about. So this is why you're here to talk about that. And do you think it should happen today? And the answer to that wasn't forthcoming because she couldn't answer that because that would blow her whole argument out of the water. People like this lady here are part of the problem in society that we have relating to the mess that's created by white liberals. And when I talk about white liberals, we're talking about people like Bob Geldof and Bono and all the rest of those snivelling cretins on there who are still there in the modern day preaching their rubbish. Yes, we shouldn't be intervening around the world. Yes, we should forget about all countries around the world and stop believing that we are this huge, powerful nation that needs to go around solving problems. But of course, people don't even listen to that today, do they? So they're doing it today with Gaza. We're still doing it. We're still talking about other places around the world, even today, whilst this lady is moaning about the fact that we're still doing it then, we're still doing it now, and all of this is created by the white liberal. So let's start doing what this lady proposes. So let's stop worrying about Gaza. Let's stop worrying about all around the Middle East. In fact, let's stop worrying about the entire world. And let's just get on with creating a great island nation. And that's what we should be doing. Final thing that I'm going to address here, in case you missed the racism, here it is again for you.
And last but not least, it led to a lack of self-esteem and pride for black people all around the world because we kept seeing images of swollen bellies and black people and flies in their eyes. And then we didn't see that with white people when we came to England, you know, Windrush up until now.
Yeah.
So therefore, there is a complete distinction between how one views a black person, swollen belly, flies in their eyes,
Yeah, no, I get that.
versus England, capitalism, money. Oh, I have a good life. This is why we have issues with immigration now, because you lot made sure you told the world how great you are. So this is what happens. Sorry, right tangent.
Okay.
Yeah, we did tell the world how great we are. And you know why we did that? Because we are. That's why. And in response to all of that there, what should be the appropriate response if ever you are confronted with a fanatical racist like this lady here who sits all day and comes up with varied means and with to talk about racism that happened, you know, 300 years ago or over 300, 400 years ago, is this: I don't care about your stupid argument. I don't care about 1700 or 1800 or 1900 or anything whatsoever about any of that. I don't care if we had slaves in the past. I don't care. I don't care if Africa, which they did, had slaves in the past. There were slaves all over the world at the time that this lady was talking about. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care about other countries, I don't care about your arguments, and I don't care about slavery at all, because here's the truth. I've never had a slave. I've never had a slave. None of the people I know have ever had slaves. And in fact, going back through generation after generation after generation, I can hand on heart tell you that none of my family have had slaves, and even if I could trace that back to 1700 and I could find somebody in my distant past who used to have slaves, I don't care. I don't care about any of it. These arguments are outdated. What you're witnessing here is, in effect, a 20th century argument. These arguments are done. And the longer that time goes on, the more race grifters like this lady here are going to have to come up with more and more overtly complicated arguments with which to draw people in. But in essence, as you caught at the end, these arguments all come from the same place. And this lady is a racist, as demonstrated by her final statement. You lot, as she wags her finger. You lot. And there you go. And can you imagine reversing that in public? You lot. What would be the reaction? Anyway, thanks very much for your time.